Hello and welcome to Apocalypse Extravaganza, a writing exercise in which I construct a post-apocalyptic scenario involving myself as the main character in first-person perspective. After introducing the story via a first chapter, I ask the audience to propose characters that I would then add to the story as I continue writing it. This is Chapter 1. It had been foretold. I looked down at my phone. It was still early in the day, so there was still a decent amount of power left in its battery. The last few days I had learned that using the GPS function, in conjunction with Google Maps, drained the life quite rapidly. As such, I had started to use the function less and less, hoping to get my phone through the day without its battery dying. Little did I know that it wouldn't be the battery's life I would need to worry about. My girlfriend had warned me of the possibility, told me that it had been foretold. A fortune teller, a mystic, one who claimed to have had foreseen previous natural disasters, was now calling on an earthquake and tsunami combo. Apparently, Japan would be the target, and wouldn't you know it, that's exactly where I was. Only a couple of days ago, an earthquake did occur, a 6.6 no less. A tsunami warning had been announced, but none actually came. They say that when an aftershock has a higher rating on the Richter scale, it then becomes the main shock, and the one before it is relegated to the status of a foreshock. Could this 6.6 have been simply a foreshock? Kamakura, an interesting place. It lies on East Japan's southern shore, known for its many Buddhist temples. Years ago, its people built one of these temples, together with a statue representing the Buddhist goddess of mercy. Today, the statue still sits upon the hill where it was constructed. The temple, however, had been washed away in a tsunami long ago. After spotting the conspicuous white Buddha head from afar, I looked to my phone to determine the most efficient route to it. After a short walk, several confused glances at the Google Maps application on my phone, and the kind guidance of a fellow tourist, I found myself face to face with the goddess herself. She actually used to be a man. A Singaporean staying at the same guest house had told me the night before. I guess I'll have to take a closer look to make sure, I had said in jest, to a late, somewhat uncomfortable laugh. Here I was, ready to take a closer look, but to my dismay, the statue was only from the stomach up. This is just half a goddess, I said to myself. A couple groundskeepers pruning the surrounding plants gave me a suspicious look as I walked around to the back of the statue. There was an opening in the back leading into said statue. I walked inside and found an open notebook on a desk. Inside it were written various prayers to the goddess in different languages. I immediately noticed the one in Thai, since I live in Thailand. After perusing it for a while, I took hold of the adjacent pen and began writing. Please forgive me in the same way that I forgive others, I wrote. As I was putting the pen down, I began to feel a strange sensation. Had what I had written immediately stricken a chord with the gods? The ground trembled and shook. It was unlike any sensation I had felt before. I dropped to the ground and crawled up into the fetal position. Before I knew it, the shaking had stopped. My mind raced. What did this mean? I stepped out from the insides of the goddess to see if anything had been damaged by the quake. Well, most buildings in Japan are built to withstand the belly achings of the earth, so consequently nothing really seemed to have changed or been damaged. But then, a siren pierced through the dumbstruck silence. The workers who had made me feel unwelcome were now scattering up the hill. Oh, snap, I thought. It's actually happening. My worst nightmare. I immediately recalled what Japan's previous tsunami had done to the residents of Sendai, how the water simply bullied the houses around like leaves blown in the wind. I followed the two workers up into the thick of the forest and up the hill. There were no paths, so the short trek turned into much more of a hassle than I had bargained for. By the time I had reached the peak and pulled out a cigarette to smoke, I had gotten several cuts all over my arms and legs. No smoking. One of the two workers looked at me in disapproval. I shrugged in disbelief. We're about to face a possible life-ending disaster, and you're telling me not to smoke. His coworker got his attention with a finger point. They both stood, mouth open, saying something. I guess probably it meant, "Oh my God," or some variation thereof, based on their facial expressions. Others had begun to scale the hill as well, in hopes of escaping what they believed would come. The three of us were soon joined by other tourists and locals. The pointing continued, and I tried to move into a good vantage point to see what was happening through the thick of the trees. "What's happening?" I asked a fellow Caucasian man, hoping that he could speak English. "I don't know, but it could be a tsunami." I knew that already. The question wasn't what could be happening. I pushed a branch down and witnessed the most frightening event I'd ever seen. The water simply spilled into the valley, carrying cars, houses, trees, and God knows what else. And it was so high, the water had reached the base of the statue not far down from where we were standing. How the hell had the water risen that high? That's just not right. What if it gets even higher than that? I feared for my safety. But even in that moment, I felt I had to take out my camera, and I snapped up a few shots. I then took out the memory card and put it in a plastic bag together with my phone, cigarettes, and lighter. I tied the plastic bag up tight, and then took out another plastic bag from my backpack and wrapped that around my valuables as well. I was prepared for the worst. The waters continued to rise, and were still moving fast. They had reached the chest level of the goddess statue. I knew I would need to hold on to something that floated if it came to that. Some people around me had started to climb up onto the trees. I shook my head. That was not what I would do. I left them to their monkeying and moved down to where the waters met the land. At this point, it almost seemed as though the land had started sinking into the ocean, or perhaps underground water reserves had leaked out onto the surface. All that speculation mattered about as much as the backpack I had just abandoned. I was looking for something floating on the water, something I could hold on to. That came in the form of a wooden door. At first, it looked as though I wouldn't be able to reach it. But then, it rammed right into the goddess's head and flipped up onto it. I just needed to swim out to it and grab it. But such a task seemed daunting given the speed of the current. But for some reason, I felt like I had to try. It was almost as though the goddess was beckoning me. I tested the water with my foot first to see how powerful the pull felt. It seemed possible, doable. I took off my shoes and pants, tied the plastic bag holding my valuables around my wrist, and carefully kicked off with a now small island peeking out from the water. I swam diagonally against the current, and it was exhausting. But I kept my faith in my decision and the Goddess of Mercy. Would she forgive me of my sins and allow me to live, or would she find me a contemptuous man, vindictive and disgusted with the world and humanity? Fortunately, it was the former, for with one last push, I found myself face to face with the goddess. My palms grasped onto the edge of the doorway and pulled it back into the water, and off I went to the whims of the ocean and all the gods who gave a damn. And that concludes the first chapter of the first story of Apocalypse Extravaganza. Now, in the comments section below, please propose certain characters that my character will meet as he attempts to survive through this apocalyptic scenario. Cheers, everyone. Best of luck.